Hello, how are you? I'm Rebecca Robertson. I'm president and executive producer of Park Avenue Armory, and I just want to thank you all for coming to this wonderful day. We collaborated with Studio Museum in Harlem, and it's such a pleasure working with Thelma and working with Nico, and all of you who performed, all of you who shared with us your words and your wisdom. The conversations were fascinating. We just so enjoyed having all of you here. So this is our last session, and then after this session, Toshi Reagon and her band will be performing at the other end of the hall. So let me call Kevin Tarrant, who is going to give us an invocation and a native traveling song. We are on Lenape territory here.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Tarrant. I'm from the Hopi people of Arizona and the HoChunk people of Wisconsin, and I'm the lead singer for the Super Cloud Singers, as well as the executive managing director for Safe Harbors Indigenous Collective. And we were asked today to help out with the land acknowledgement earlier this morning, or at lunchtime, noon. We had Chief Harry Wallace from the HoChunk people come in and
Thank you so much. And Thelma, do you want to come and join me? So I just want to say, Thelma, we're so delighted that we've been able to do this together. It was really terrific. And I want to acknowledge our programming director, Avery Willis-Hoffman, who has organized so much of it for us. She's done a fantastic job. Anyway, so now please come ahead. And so we have Bill and Marc and Julie and Toshi. And here's your... Yeah.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you to the entire Park Avenue Armory team who's made this incredible day possible. And thank you to the Studio Museum in Harlem team who have worked collaboratively to make this day happen. I know, because I've seen many of you have been here all day, so we, the last panel of the day before the amazing performance we'll have a little later, appreciate the endurance and the stamina that you all have had to be engaged in all of these ideas all afternoon long. And I think, like you, am deeply excited to be sitting here with these 4 artistic visionaries. Now, you all have programs that actually have a beautiful Julie Mehretu painting on the cover that have all their extensive bios. So I know I don't really have to say much more about Toshi Reagon, Bill T. Jones, Julie Mehretu, and Marc Bamuthi Joseph. You know who they all are from our program, but really want to thank them all for being here and being willing to be in conversation. And this is going to be a conversation. They all have tried to ask me what I'm going to ask them, but I think what the day has set out for us is to think broadly and deeply and from their individual places on this question of culture in a changing America, which I would revise or add to and talk about what this role of an artist is in thinking about culture in a changing America, and want to think about this with these 4 artists, right, who have been doing this kind of thinking in and through their work for their entire careers. So I wanted to start with a very broad, unanswerable question, so that's why I'm going to push them to the specific with it, and ask, starting right here, see? Don't worry, it won't keep going this way. But what it means to you today, I mean literally today, to be an artist.
Today, it means pursuit beyond agonizing exhaustion. It means an engagement with boundary and an evisceration of boundary. It means the responsibility for rebuilding the moral infrastructure of this country. It means not being afraid to just lay up in the bed and watch BET, if that's really what is called for, because boundary breaking can sometimes be burdensome. And it's really necessary when you're kind of responsible for all these highfalutin things, or at the very least these metrics of accountability are self-imposed. It's really necessary to just eat French fries and not trip, which is to say self-care. Being an artist means being aware of those things, at least right now.
Thank you. Julie.
I mean, I think for me it means what I feel it has meant for a long time, but even more so now, which is an insistence on maintaining and protecting creative, inventive space, and really investigating who you are as an individual and what space and you want to either explode and make for yourself, or what space is necessary to, and what language you want to continue to kind of push, invent, cop from, and morph, shift into something unseen, unexperienced, and really, I mean, the most fierce imagination possible. I think that that's something that has to be insisted on at all means, and not to see the kind of political pressure of a moment as something that can hinder or interfere or get in the way of that. Like, it's the time to work harder than ever.
Bill.
Well, I think at the risk of sounding I'm answering the question from a negative, I will say that because of the way in which I have come up through the art world, and we can talk about what that world is, I was, when this particular moment, I don't know what moment you were talking about, but I suspect that it's the same, the era that we live in right now, people would look at me and say, okay, you're an artiste engagé. And first it used to, particularly the Europeans, the French, did this, and they loved that, Black American artists who are engaged, you know. And they say, well, what does an artist have to do? Have to do. And that always makes my hackles go up. I say an artist should be the freest persons in the culture. Yes. An artist should be sometimes literally running naked through the streets, thumbing their nose at all received wisdom. Now let that sink in, because that's now there's a pushback now. We thought we got them on the right, and now we realize we got them on the left. An artist does not have to do a goddamn thing, but the artist is a man, cisgendered man, a woman, a trans person, a person with a location in the culture, which oftentimes has to do with what your bank account is or how many credit cards you have, what your education is. And the question is that person. What does that person need to do? And it's self-involved, it's true, not pleasant people, not here to make anyone feel good, but it's great when it happens.
Can you say the question again?
What does it mean to you today to be an artist?
Okay, thank you. Today, I had to arrive. I had to get here on time. It started at 9 in the morning, and then I had to sleep because I was so tired from my travels, and then I had to wake up, which was really difficult. And my daughter helped me get awake to be in this beautiful place again. That's literally today what it meant to come and do my job I was asked to do, and be in congregation with these and you and all the things that already happened today. And if I take a wider shot, it's constantly trying to understand my voice and my contribution to the webbing that I feel we are and planet is, everything that's breathing, entangled in, and to try to understand why we're so destructive and change that.
Thank you. Bill, earlier you sort of posited a sort of space of conversation that we've been in the art world for some time about art and politics.
I was telling Thelma about an experience that used to be rather common for people like myself, when about 15 years ago, I think, The Guardian was writing an article because of some kerfluffle that happened in London about people doing political art. So they had sent a reporter, I know this, excuse me if this is too dance-oriented, but they had spoken to Pina Bausch, Billy Forsythe, myself, and some others. Can art be political? Can art be political? It's kind of a joke considering what this day has been. But then again, maybe we don't call what happened here today political. It's just a type of expression. So at that time, they said to me, that people used to say to me, really decent people, look, man, if you want to do politics, do politics. If you want to do art, do art. Don't confuse the two. That used to be the discourse. So we can all sit smugly and think, that was then. I wonder what happened to that attitude. And the people with the money, and the people who buy paintings worth millions of dollars and the whole critical establishment. I wonder how they feel about that question. And then there's fashion.
Right. But I think what that brings up, I think the way that question morphs itself in this moment is really to talk about art and artists and activism, right? The sort of more active engagement with this idea. And I want to ask you, Toshi, about the relationship of art and activism in your practice. And do you need to name it, or how can you give us some idea of a language to describe the sort of potency of what you do?
I mean, my people all sang, and they all grew food. In Georgia, my grandfather was a carpenter. He had a 6th grade education. He built the house that's still there in Albany, Georgia. I like to use the word activate, because I think we activated out of our creativity to house our souls and to always have access to our voices, and our very bodies are the home that we occupy, coming to this land where we were told we aren't really people, and where people were excavating us for their very narrow definitions of possibilities of life. And since I know, probably lots of y'all know, that there is so much more to have and to be in, I'm gonna use congregation 1,000 times, with, and I mean all breathing things, living things, we couldn't tolerate just being the machine that they wanted us to be. And so our voices, our imaginations, our understanding of sonic waves, our understanding of motion, our understanding of fluidity of language, our understanding of the earth, our understanding of food is activating on a level of living that no one thought we should have. And so there's no separation for me from that to anything else. Those are the words I have. I don't have one word.
And so, Julie, I'm going to ask you to respond to that, because I know you've thought deeply about this as an abstract painter, right? You've thought about the language of abstraction and the way in which the language of your paintings and the presence of your paintings sort of live on their own in a language and vocabulary you created, but also are informed deeply, right, by the way you see the world. So can you talk about, again, what might have always been this dichotomy between the abstract, right, and the figurative, that you, I think, have done some incredible boundary breaking around in your practice?
I mean, I think that I really want to, I feel that the way that I approach making paintings I approach that as a way to investigate, literally, and to further understand who I am in relation to the world I'm in. And there's this constant investigation and push in trying to further understand that. Part of that is me negotiating sociality in a political space and understanding and negotiating my reality in that. But the same, and making sense of that. And I make these paintings in an effort to push that and find these breaks and kind of invent something else within that space, using the photograph or the news media image, or using historic information, whatever that might be. But it's all in the effort of trying to build an image and reinvent or invent something else with the language of abstraction that can kind of exist elsewhere. And that is not, those paintings can be activist gestures, they can be that, but they can also be paintings on the wall that you have a very different type of experience with. I'm interested in that experience that happens. But I do a lot of other work that I think activates, to use your word, that is just part of my engagement in who I am in being here. And I really don't try to put that pressure in my studio process. I believe so much in what you just said about being free and my effort in terms of trying to be as free as I can be in my process is to be as free and to not rely on any expectations I have even of what my work can do and what it has done in the past and how I can further push that. all that to say, in this moment, I feel like my paintings feel like they're being made out of a different space of a different type of urgency, and there's a different explosion of creative kind of insistence in them that I feel like is interesting. That is the response to this particular last couple years of political reality that we're negotiating.
Bamuthi, can art be useful? Should art be useful?
Sure. Useful, utilitarian, functional in the sense that emotion is useful and passion is useful. And I think that we have to address the paradigm that that Bill started to describe. I think we understand politics almost too literally or too exclusively in terms of its legislative function. Politics ultimately is a nexus of the people. And when we think about what is useful among the people, love is useful. It's not just a kind of esoteric, kind of marginal phenomena that may happen if you're lucky. There are people that I have vehement disagreements with in terms of political standpoint or political perch, but they eat. They've managed to get somebody to fall in love with them. They cheer for the same sports teams that that I cheer for, right? So art is useful in the sense that it is an instrument by which we can recognize the humanity in one another. It is actually one of the few social instruments that we currently have in which empathy is the currency of choice. So, a lot of folks would like to, I think, take art and say it's this thing that happens over here, and that certainly has happened in our educational system. The activation of the body, actually, within the context of public education has been buried, right? But when I think about soulfulness, and when I think about...
I asked him to please
Yeah.
Define it for us.
When I think of soulfulness, I think about a visceral blackness, and I think about an embodied practice of empathy, set to music, generally. And where else am I going to find that in the discourse? Where else am I going to find that in my public life, other than through the engagement of art and art practices and the inspired bodies that are kind of paragons for that function within our culture? Those are the artists. It's not Michael Jordan, even though I had a poster of Michael Jordan, in my room as a kid. You might argue that he himself is this kind of bastion of kind of artistic practice on the basketball court, but he is not the being that inspired me to be empathic or loving. Bill T. Jones was that being, Bernice Reagon Johnson was that being, seriously, So there's that soulfulness.
One thing, Marc, thank you very much for love. This is a very loving man. I was wondering, who teaches us how to think? Who teaches us how to think? And I think reading today an article quoting a New York Times critique of the climate, they say group feel is now, instead of thoughtful analysis, group feel. I feel that the guys that took Mr. Smollett, right? I feel it was homophobic and racially motivated. We don't even have the proof yet. Yeah. But then there's already this desire. We got it. So I'm with you about love, but I think there's something about, who does that without being too white? Because you're supposedly soulfulness and the essentialism has a color, right? But who does that with the culture? And how do you get people's attention and get them to, whoa, hold on. I know you're feeling hot right now, but hold on, think, and history. Yes. You know, of course, that this has been done before. This was actually being done 2,000 years ago. Yes. You know that this was actually being done. So, okay, who is teaching us how to sharpen the intellectual muscle? Yeah. That's something I think art does.
Well, I agree, and I was going to say I think it's what artists do, but I think that we have yet to articulate that clearly enough to position artists at the center of the conversation that allows that to be understood, right? And I think that in some ways that's where, when we start talking about where artists exist, we talk about space, right? And the spaces in which we encounter art, and the ways in which, as a person engaged in thinking, where would that happen, right, at all ages? And I think something that ties you all together, in addition to your visionary artwork, is that you all have created spaces in institutions that exist or in ones that have not existed before because there was a need. So can you talk about the sort of principle of artists about making space for art, making space for the conversation? Toshi, do you want to begin?
Sure. Well, I think, you know, to some of what Bill was saying, in 2010, when the incoming Congress came in, and they were horrific, and and it was just a very weird time. If you remember, we had the first black president, and we was overjoyed, and everybody had this big, I'm sure everybody didn't, but it felt that way.
Everybody that mattered did.
It felt that way. The streets were full of people. People was hugging and helping each other, and it was beautiful for about 2 days. And and then when, you know, we realized, like, he still had to deal with the same system that already existed, everybody got more and more depressed each day, and allowed for horrific people to occupy positions of power that control many of the things that we need in our lives. And I thought about that, the depression and the stepping out, the not engage, the personal relationship we have with a vote. That it's like, it's my vote, I have a right to my vote, and I need to pick the person who's gonna do the most. And then when that person might still be cool, but, like, you know, don't do all of the changes you need, or they say something you really disagree with, you like go home and be mad and then just decide, I'm not gonna vote the next time. And you open up a valley, you know, of horror, because the people who have not put out any energy towards you are waiting for you to get sad and not participate. And as you said, this has happened before. And so we are in this cycle, right? At some point, we have to really think about our emotions and our emotional relationships. And so everybody dived into social media, which you also brought up. And I remember for the first time, like, people started to say things about women's bodies and about putting women in jail if they was on drugs and something happened to their baby. A bunch of black women around the country got arrested for stealing because they put their children in better schools, and then they got found out and they went to jail away from their children. I started to hear the language of what is rape, what is abuse, start to get shifted as all of these old white men started talking about our bodies. And it was the first time nobody said, hey, let's go do something about this. So if you looked at Facebook, you saw, like, everybody mad, everybody, you know, pushing on the Twitter, everybody's talking about it, but it was no action. So I started a festival called Word Rock Sword, a festival exploration of women's lives, all are welcome. And I started 9 years ago with $1,500 because I was like, if I do a Kickstarter or something like that, I won't get to do the festival. I just could see that those two things couldn't exist close together. And then I asked people if they wanted to offer something over the course of a week. And it's like that. It's like, what can we afford? What can we do? Some years I'm in collaboration with the Ford Foundation, Australia Lesbian Foundation for Justice, and all kinds of organizations. Sometimes it's like, y'all want to come to my house on Monday, you want to go take a dance class on Tuesday, somebody always does a yoga practice, there's always a big concert, and there is always a celebration the next Sunday. And it really was to see people, to talk about what felt current, to operate out of your, soul and your spirit, and really all are welcome. So you got a lot of different kinds of people and to do it, and it's still funded out of how much money do I have in my bank account that I'm willing to lose. And anybody who does something on any night gets to decide if it costs money or not, and then they keep whatever they decide to happen. And it's literally kept me inside of a conversation. Every year I feel like I can't do it the next year, and then every year I'm like, if I don't do it, it's gonna be crazy. Yeah. So yeah, that's Word Rock Sword.
Thank you. Bill.
Oh, well, mine, and it'd be cool. I feel like this is an eggshell moment. My company merged with a historic incubation spot. Matter of fact, I did my first concert there in 1977 in New York, and this place, we merged. It was a cultural merger, and I remember, and you were there that night, I was trying to launch these programs of talking. And I remember at this space, this is New York Live Arts, you're all invited to come down. I did something one night, which was titled, "When Did the Avant-Garde Become Black?" Now you have to realize, it sounds anodyne now, doesn't it? But at that time, quote, as someone said, that caused a shitstorm, right? Why did it cause a shitstorm? Because why are you so angry that you're separating yourself from the rest of our community, our cool avant-garde community? What axe are you grinding? Wait a minute, hold on. I'm just asking the question, right? And what is right now, I look at our audiences. It is very difficult to get an audience. I'm doing racial looking now. I think we're doing pretty good here, right? When I look at my audience, it's really hard to get, I know we don't want to talk about color, black and white people in the same cultural space watching something at the same time. And everyone's decent, but what is that? And did I drink the Kool-Aid around We Shall Overcome? And that black girls and white girls and black boys and white boys and Jews and Gentiles will hold hands someday and say, free at last, free at last. Did I buy the Kool-Aid, right? I sometimes feel like a dinosaur. But that's not the way it rolls. That's not the way it rolls. You know? Well, I'm not sure what that's about, because I am having a dark night of the soul right now. Everything that I used to believe was the truth. I was at Woodstock at age 17. I dropped acid at Woodstock. You know, Jimi Hendrix was my man and all that like that. But I don't know anymore about what I should expect about the world coming together. So my space downtown is still trying to find an identity that says that is what we're open-hearted and come one, come all. Except there's a black man who is the artistic director with a Chinese woman who is his co-director. And we're trying, our board says, okay, Bill, what's the brand? You're here now. What's different about this space? And have you looked at, this is Thelma's very important, that's why we love her, but how many black folks actually are in positions of running organizations in this town and down there, right? And I'm dismayed by it. I'm dismayed, and that's my project. I've got something to prove.
To do. Thank you, Bill. Julie.
Well, many of us have benefited from the work you have all done. You're not just you, but your entire generation
Thank you.
And I mean that. Like, I would not be able to be making the work I'm making now, and engaging in the art world in the way that my work and I am able to engage with, without the number of artists who've been working in abstraction who have been ignored and people have not paid attention to, have not been given adequate spaces of representation, without the curatorial kind of the history of black curators and how that's changing right now. So while I think right now we are seeing an enormous number of exhibitions that are being mounted, solo survey exhibitions of black artists, in whether it's the Whitney Museum, which has been tremendous in its effort of pushing this language and hiring Black curators, Adrienne Edwards and Rujeko Hockney, as well as like the new museum just now opening their exhibition with Neri Ward. MoMA is plans to open an exhibition with William Popel. And so you have this shift. I mean, Kerry James Marshall at the Met, that was a firestorm, and it showed, and so in this way, something through a lot of work that you've done, Thelma, and we are all indebted to that support, and the work that you've done for these decades. So I just want to just acknowledge that. So while you're feeling negative,
keep the faith about free at last.
Keep the faith. Yeah, a little bit. But also, just in terms of organizations, I mean, just to be brief, me and some friends, fellow other artists, and artists, architectural historians, writers, creative thinkers, all people of color, queer community, of people who were working and just organically working and living upstate in the Catskills, started a nonprofit organization that we wanted to be able to continue to create the space we all used up there, which was living off the land, being able to farm organically and have an agricultural component. So art and agriculture working together, sustainable development for creative space, being able to like have 200 acres up in the Catskills that wouldn't just become gentrified by log cabins, which is happening near us, as well as other ideas of development upstate, which are casinos, this kind of proposal of these future casinos. So we're really trying to build a different model in that. And we have an artist in residency project up there, which really tries to base its idea of programming around historic works of art or new gestures of our thinking. And this is really goes back to what you said about who's teaching us to think. And in this space, it's a lab and space and environment and landscape and agricultural kind of space to develop and come up with ideas around that. Right now, we're basing our programming off of the idea of the Exodus, and not the kind of utopian end of the Exodus project, but really that moment of being lost and cognitive confusion of the space of those 40 years, 40 months, whatever it was,
in
eternity. In the desert,
40
years. But that long aspect of Exodus, and what is Exodus? Is it a place, or is it this moment, and this investigation of artists and thinkers who are really trying to negotiate this moment of cognitive confusion, especially not just what's politically here, but this kind of large-scale homelessness that's taking place across the globe, and the kind of bigger political climate change that we're experiencing.
Yeah, thank you.
Role, okay, so what's the first thing? The first thing I think I want to say is I am Haitian. I'm a first-generation American. My parents are from Haiti, which I think means that I shouldn't be afraid of a machete. So,
Mark, what is that?
Now, I said I shouldn't be afraid of a machete. But it's important to call into the room ancestral blood, because I come from not just revolutionaries, but I come from people who are really good at revolting. So, I think I used the word accountability earlier, and I'm accountable to that. I am accountable to Ntozake Shange and to James Baldwin. I'm accountable to the writers that raised me. I'm accountable to that. I've been associated with probably 3 organizations over the last several years. One, a not-for-profit organization that works with teen writers called Youth Speaks, based in the Bay Area. A contemporary performing arts center in San Francisco called Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. I was a curator there, and then had a highfalutin title. And then I now have a highfalutin title at the Kennedy Center, which is, the title is Vice President and Artistic Director of Social Impact. And I like to talk about all 3 elements of that title, because we all do hella stuff. Like, that's, artists and their hybridity, artists and their multifunctionality. But having a title of vice president and artistic director is really important, because I'm embedded within this very large institution as a practicing artist for whom administration is part of the creative practice. And I think that that's something that we all share in common, that the curatorial lens isn't removed from the way that we self-identify as artists and as practitioners. Now, what the fuck that means in the context of the Kennedy Center is a whole different thing. Because the Kennedy Center, besides being the nation's performing arts center, is a federal memorial to one of the great presidents in this country's history. And so as a federal institution, the line that I am to toe is between the nonpartisan and the non-political. We are, that's a whole other thing. We can just talk forever about we, but we are a nonpartisan institution. We cannot be non-political. I don't believe we can be, and certainly that last part of the title, social impact, I actually cannot do my job if we're non-political. So what's about to happen at the Kennedy Center is there's been a significant investment in brick and mortar. We're about to open up a new set of interconnected pavilions called The Reach, an annex to the campus, which I look at as a kind of architectural emblem to community. And the great stress, maybe for all of us, is to define community in very specific terms.
Amen.
And to also acknowledge, and this is something that we were talking about, acknowledge that the engagement of community is not a charitable act. It's not like, I'm going to show you this great art and you be witness to that. That is pandering and condescending and no way actually to empower people. So the shift that I hope to initiate within this institution is the relationship between engagement and empowerment, and the creation of cultural incubation space that ultimately generates agency among a wide, varied body of humans across the district and across the country. As a federal institution, I believe that it's our responsibility to think about inspiration as a democratic ideal. And so that's the gig, inspiration for all.
Okay. And in these last few minutes, as I've been given the sign, on that note, what I plan to ask you all is that in thinking about this idea of culture in a changing America, in one word, I want you all to tell us all what inspires you when you think about culture in this moment.
Children.
That was my word, actually.
Cool.
I guess resistance.
Truth.
Water. We need it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I want to thank all of you for not only this conversation, for being able to take a lot of what has happened today and to voice to it and from it and give us a space to continue this conversation. I think this moment in this space that the Park Avenue Armory has created that brings us together, right, in real time to engage and discuss is really powerful. And that's what inspires me right now, this sense of our power and the need to acknowledge that sense of our power, right, to create change. And I think a lot of what has happened today has given us the seeds. So Bill, to your idea about faith, I think the faith that we all have to have is that we've planted the seeds, right? We're planting the seeds, and we are helping to create this future that we imagine, that we're existing in the arts and as artists, but that we hope to imagine. I want to invite everyone to stick around for Toshi's amazing performance, which will happen in about 10 or 15 minutes. But in the meantime, please come out into the hallway, have a drink, say hello, and then join Toshi at the end of this hallway in the other room for her performance. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.